So hi again. Um, my idea is to finish this part of this series um, and continue basically the background of how psychology has been like being conceived and worked out. And today I want to talk about the 50s and to see what happened with psychology and the developments. We have two major wars in the First World War One and World War Two. So psychoanalysis was the first force in psychology. Um, the humanist psychologist is coming in the 50s, and the humanist psychology is this what called the force, and humanistic psychology believe that behaviorism is the second force. So psychoanalysis was criticized by behaviorism. Behaviorism believed that too much mental effort in understanding the humans, so behaviorism started thinking about the behavior. And they started in Russia, in the Soviet Union actually, with Ivan Pavlov, with the classical conditioning. If you remember, they made experiments with a dog that they trained the dog to get into the wheels of a tank, and they were used for that. So the dog was programmed to commit suicide basically because the dog was loaded with dynamite or TNT. So then in the United States, Watson and Skinner developed the behaviorism. So the supreme idea of behaviorism is that by repetition of behavior, you can change also internally. You remember that they were complaining about that the psychoanalysis was too mental, so too concerned about the interior, and most of the hypotheses and the outcomes of treatments were kind of difficult to achieve because it took a long time for the therapist to make any profound changes. Continuing with this background, and since we are in the 50s and analyzing the post Second World War issue, I want to address something that is really relevant in order to conceive this idea that everything is related and we cannot isolate one element from the other. And for example, in the 1920s, Edward Bernays wrote a book called Propaganda. It was an extremely influential book until today. So this person, Bernays, who was the nephew of Freud, used Freud's ideas, but in order to manipulate the masses. And he has a really interesting statement here, among many others, but I think this is really, really outstanding. I'm going to read it for you. It's a paragraph. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinion of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate these unseen mechanisms of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. So, since the old system of divine right disappeared, people have to be convinced in order to do things. Bernays, in the tens, in 1914, if I'm not wrong, started a campaign for women to smoke, and he was very successful. He did it in New York. He he prepared a situation in by a parade. Like a number of models were walking like any other women, any other person, And Bernays was close to them, and he called the press, and he called them. He has a sign to tell them that at some particular moment, every single one gonna get a cigarette. And so they were like getting hundreds of photographies, and they went to the papers. And women went, and after his signal, they went and got the cigarette, and they light the cigarette, and then in the newspapers were called the cigarettes the torch of freedom. So from that day on, women started smoking in the United States. Years later, Bernays was appalled, being a Jew, like Freud himself, and he said this because Goebbels was using in Germany his technique. And he said, Goebbels was using my book, Crystallizing Public Opinion, as a basis for his destructive campaign against the Jews of Germany. This shocked me. So, there is a saying in Spanish that nobody knows for who works. Nadie sabe para quien trabaja. So, Bernays was paving the way for Nazism in Germany in a very unique and important way. So the manipulation of the mind, social mind. Mussolini did something similar with the marches, with the uniform, with the salute, a little bit before than Hitler, and in turn using behaviorism. See, the whole idea was that if you modify the behavior, if you do the fascist or the Nazi salute so many times, if you make these people to work as robots so many times, this behavior will become part of their psyches, and then completely be part of them. I'm not sure if naturalized or not, but really be part of their unconscious. So going back to humanistic psychology, I want to address the pyramid of needs created by Abraham Maslow in the United States, and this pyramid has 5 different levels. The first level being the physiological level. The second level it's the safety level. The third level is love and belonging. The fourth is esteem, and the fifth is self-actualization. So the physiological is breathing, food, water, sex, sleep, homeostasis, and excretion. So all the body needs. Safety, security of body, of employment, of resources, of morality, of the family, of health, of property. That's the second level. The third one is love and belonging, friendship, family, sexual intimacy. And the fourth one is esteem, self-esteem, confidence, achievement, respect of others, respect by others. The last level, which is the tip of the pyramid, it's morality, creativity, spontaneity, problem solving, lack of prejudice, and acceptance of facts, among others, because you can include more elements. So humanistic psychology, and also another psychology that came also in the 50s, which is self-psychology, addresses this point in a different way, considering the effect of the war in human beings. So at this time, it was a mixture between values and approaches, and the most institutionalized psychology was still thinking about, like, for example, behaviorism and ways of controlling the masses. For example, in the United States at the time, with a project called Paperclip, when the United States brought a lot of scientists from Germany and from Russia, from basically Nazi scientists, psychologists, and everybody else, that they were doing rockets and experiments in medicine and different things. They were including these ideas in a program that was here created by the CIA called MK Ultra. So that's not a secret. You can find it in the internet. It's really simple to address that, and you can see what they were doing. Basically, controlling the behavior of people through different methods, including LSD. LSD was a really important tool used in the 50s, and then in the 60s were taken by the hippie movement and everybody else. Timothy Leary gave a new dimension for these experiments. And if I'm not wrong, Timothy Leary also participated in this program as one of the guinea pigs. So, humanistic psychology was not only a new approach in theoretical terms, but it also was a new approach in terms of therapy. The humanistic psychologists believe that more than a technique, the psychologist or the counselor should have more empathy in order to understand the patient, because with a lot of theoretical resources and a lot of theory, the connection between the patient was not necessarily into the main focus of the therapist, and hence the feeling of the patient or the feeling of the client, the way they call it nowadays, was like lost. I want to talk about that in the future, but let's say now that psychology in a way replaces friendship. Psychology in a way replaces the natural organic neighbor that talks with you, or the father or the mother that have time to you to form you because he's so busy doing something else. So before the organic economy, unable to connect people in such a way that they were much more related, and this relation was not, as in sociology mentioned, it was not a secondary relationship or a relationship in relation of a thing that is in the middle of these two subjects, but a primary relationship where the subjects were the main object of the conversation or the main interest of the interaction. So that's something that I'm just throwing it right now, but I think that is one of the main problems that we lost. Not only our capacity, I don't think the capacity has been lost. What is lost are the dynamics, the social dynamics that allowed us humans, particularly Westerners right now, to relate to each other without the interest, not necessarily an interest like a vested interest, but an interest that is beyond ourselves. For example, and just an hypothesis here. A lot of female, when they were not in power before, were looking for a man with money or with power. A lot of male were trying to get the trophy woman because that will tell about them. So basically, these two attitudes, one for survival and the other one for narcissist needs, were in the forefront of the whole dynamic of relationships, instead of being the person themselves. There is a really interesting work done by Eric Fromm, The Art of Loving, that addresses several of these points.